The air was thick with shouting, the once peaceful village square, now a battleground of accusations. The leaders of two powerful families stood at the center, their voices rising in anger. A woman, her face twisted in rage, pointed at the elder of the opposing family, blaming him for a series of misfortunes that had struck her kin. "You are the cause of our suffering," she screamed, her voice cutting through the tension. Around them, villagers gathered, murmuring, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The crowd was divided, but the animosity was clear. The feud had festered for years, and now it was nearing its breaking point. A villager, caught in the frenzy, stepped too close to the ancient mirror that had been placed in the center of the square, its polished surface gleaming under the midday sun. The crowd fell silent as the villager peered into it, his face reflecting in the glass. Then nothing. His reflection faded, his body following, until he vanished completely. A gasp rose from the crowd. The villagers stepped back, fear creeping into their hearts. The mirror, said to show no reflection, had claimed its first victim. Panic spread like wildfire, and the shouting turned to frantic cries for answers. Zola, the young healer, stood at the edge of the crowd, her gaze fixed on the mirror. She had seen many things in her time, but this was different. She could feel the weight of the moment, the fear, the uncertainty. Her mind raced. She had been taught to trust in the ways of her ancestors, to respect the power of the spirits. Yet she could not ignore the doubt that gnawed at her. "This is madness," she thought, her heart heavy with confusion. She wanted to act, to step forward and restore peace, but something inside her held her back. Was it the mirror's magic at work, or was there another force at play? As the villagers continued to argue, Zola found herself alone, standing apart from the chaos. She had been raised to believe in the old ways, to honor the rituals passed down through generations. Her family had long been guardians of the village's traditions, but now she wondered if they had been wrong. The spirits had always guided her, but this mirror, this strange, silent power, challenged everything she had ever known. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her mind, trained in the ways of healing and logic, rebelled against the idea that the mirror held supernatural power. But the fear in the air, the disappearance, and the whispers of a curse, could she ignore them? The arguments grew louder, turning into accusations and threats. Some villagers were quick to blame the families locked in the feud, declaring that their rivalry had angered the spirits and summoned the curse. Others seized the opportunity to gain power, using the chaos to make demands. "It's the mirror's fault," one man shouted, pointing to the glass. "It's the spirit's warning." A woman, her face twisted with fear, screamed, "It's not the mirror, it's the curse!" As the accusations flew, the villagers turned on each other, distrust and suspicion growing. The sense of unity that had once bound the community was crumbling, replaced by fear and anger. Determined to uncover the truth, Zola set her sights on the mirror. She had seen it before, but never like this. The legend surrounding it was well known, said to reveal the deepest truths of anyone who dared look into its depths. But was it truly a cursed artifact, or was there something more? Her healer's instincts told her that there was a deeper explanation, one that lay hidden beneath the surface. She couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was just a tool, and that something or someone was using it to manipulate the village. Zola moved quickly, speaking to the elders, gathering what little information she could. She knew she had to act fast. Time was running out, and the village was on the brink of tearing itself apart. As Zola delved deeper into the mystery of the mirror, the village's old stories began to surface. Whispers spread like wildfire, and soon the tale of the mirror's true purpose was known to all. It was not just a mirror, It was a vessel, a powerful artifact created long ago by the village's ancestors to reveal the truth about one's soul. The mirror, it was said, could show the hidden desires, the darkest secrets of those who gazed into it. Zola listened to the stories, her heart heavy with the weight of the legend. It wasn't just a mirror, it was a tool of revelation. And what had been revealed so far had thrown the village into chaos. The village was on edge. Fear gripped the hearts of the people as the threat of the mirror's power loomed over them. Tensions between the families were now more volatile than ever, and the villagers knew that Zola was the only one with the knowledge to unlock the mystery. But would she dare confront the mirror, knowing that it could reveal secrets that might destroy the fragile peace they had left? Zola stood at the edge of the square, looking into the faces of her people. The weight of her ancestors' expectations hung heavy on her shoulders. She had to make a choice, either embrace the old ways and face the truth, or walk away from them, seeking her own path forward. But one thing was certain: the village could not remain in this state of fear for much longer. The only way to restore peace was to understand the power of the mirror and the dangerous truths it held. Whispers filled the air, carried by every corner of the village. The vanishing had shattered the peace, leaving a cold tension where there had once been warmth. Eyes darted nervously from face to face, as if the very ground beneath them might give way. The mirror, said to show no reflection, had taken someone, and now its power was questioned. "It's cursed," one villager muttered, clutching his child close. "We should never have trusted it," another agreed, her voice trembling. The gossip spread like wildfire. What had happened? What did the mirror reveal? Nobody knew, but everyone feared it. And with each passing hour, the village grew more suspicious of its own people. Could someone in the village be to blame? Could the mirror have shown something it was never meant to? No one knew. But the village was changing, and fear was now its heartbeat. Zola stood in the middle of the village square, the weight of her family's history pressing down on her. Her family had long been the guardians of the rituals, the ones entrusted with the sacred ways passed down through generations. But now, with the mirror's power in question, her role felt like a heavy burden. Outsiders from neighboring villages had come, their eyes filled with suspicion, their demands sharp. "You're the keeper of this," one of them hissed, pointing at the mirror. "What is it hiding?" Zola's heart pounded. The eyes of the village were upon her. The elders, including her father, were expected to have answers. But Zola didn't know what to say. She had been raised to protect the traditions, but now everything she had ever been taught was being questioned. From the edge of the village, a group of men and women arrived. Their clothes were different, their eyes wary but hungry for something. "We've heard of the mirror's power," one man declared, his voice clear. "It is said to reveal the truth. We must see it for ourselves." The tension thickened. What had once been a symbol of power in their own village was now something desired by others. The visitors demanded to be shown the mirror. Some villagers stepped forward, eager to witness what the outsiders might do. Others hung back, watching with growing distrust. The accusations began immediately. "You think you can control it? It belongs to us!" one elder shouted. "No, it belongs to—" "No one," another retorted. The visitors came with promises and threats, demanding that the mirror be moved, its power shared. Zola felt the weight of the moment. The mirror had never been anyone's to control, yet here they were, fighting for it. Zola's father stood in the middle of the square, surrounded by angry voices from every direction. As an elder, he was supposed to be a man of wisdom, the one to guide them. But now, he was trapped. The visitors had come, and their demands had put him in a difficult position. Some of the villagers wanted to refuse, to stand firm and protect their traditions. but others whispered about the power the mirror could bring, about alliances with the outsiders that could benefit them. "You must decide," one of the elders warned him. "The people are restless. The mirror may be too powerful for just us to control." Zola's father closed his eyes for a moment, his face drawn with the weight of his decision. He had always stood for the old ways, but now even he could feel the shifting tides. The pressure from the outside was growing too, strong to ignore. Later, Zola confronted her father alone. She had watched him carefully, seen the hesitation in his eyes. She could not stay silent any longer. "Why don't you see it?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper but full of anger. "The traditions are not what they used to be. There is something wrong with that mirror." Her father's face hardened. "You question the very foundation of our village, Zola," he said, his voice deep and serious. "You've always been the protector of the rituals. This is your duty, not a choice." Zola shook her head, frustration building. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The mirror, it's not just a relic. It's powerful. But what if it's not the power we thought? What if it's dangerous?" Her father's gaze softened, but he said nothing. The silence between them stretched, the bond between father and daughter now frayed by doubt. Zola didn't stop. She couldn't. She went to the elders, seeking the truth she needed, the truth she feared, and she found it, an ancient tale buried deep within the old stories of the village. The mirror wasn't just an artifact. It was born from betrayal, from a long-forgotten time when her family had committed an unforgivable act. The legend spoke of a time when the mirror had been used to trap a soul, a powerful soul, in order to control the fate of a kingdom. Zola's blood ran cold. Her family's name was linked to this dark history. How could she have known? How could anyone? But now the past was alive again, and the consequences of what had been done so long ago threatened everything. Zola's childhood friend, Nia, stepped forward from the crowd, her face unreadable. "I will help you," she said, her voice calm, but firm. But something in her eyes made Zola hesitate. Nia had always been a loyal friend, but now, was she truly here to help, or did she have her own motives? As they worked together, Zola noticed the way Nia moved, always too close to the villagers who were pushing for control of the mirror. Was she secretly aligning with them? Zola didn't know whom to trust anymore. Alliances were shifting, and everyone had their own version of the truth. The more Zola uncovered, the more questions surfaced. Who was working for the village, and who was working for the mirror? As the pressure mounted, Zola's doubts grew. Was the mirror truly a tool for spiritual guidance, or had it become something else? A dangerous relic of a violent past. Zola began to question the very foundation of what her people had believed for so long. The mirror had been a source of pride, a symbol of their strength and unity. But what if it was a curse in disguise? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that it wasn't just the mirror's power that was at stake. It was the very soul of the village. The traditions, the rituals. What if they no longer had a place in this new world? What if everything they believed in was built on a lie? Rituals surrounding the mirror grew more intense. The elders began gathering, preparing for ceremonies that were meant to honor the mirror's power. But Zola couldn't shake her skepticism. She attended, but her mind was elsewhere. Each ritual felt like a performance, a blind adherence to something that had lost its meaning. Her thoughts were consumed by the need to uncover the truth. She began testing the limits of tradition, probing the edges of what she had been taught to believe. Could the power of the mirror be bent to reveal the truth? Or was it better left alone? As tensions escalated, Zola began to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable, searching for answers that could change everything. The deeper, Zola ventured into the mystery of the mirror, the more dangerous her quest became. The villagers who had once supported her began to distance themselves. The secrets she uncovered weren't just inconvenient, they were explosive. Some in the village would do anything to keep the past hidden, to protect the power they had gained through deceit. Zola's journey had become a perilous one. The more she uncovered, the more enemies she made. And now, she knew the greatest danger wasn't just the mirror, it was the truth she was about to unleash. Zola stood before the mirror once more, this time her hand trembling as it hovered just above the glass. Her heart raced. She had heard the rumors, how the mirror did more than show a person's image. What it revealed went deeper than flesh, into the very soul. In the stillness of the room, she reached out. The reflection that stared back at her was familiar, but the eyes, those eyes held a darkness, a secret she had never seen before. It was not her face that scared her, but what was hidden inside it. The truth the mirror showed wasn't just about appearances. It exposed everything, the fears, the guilt, the shadows of the soul. A sense of dread settled over her. This mirror was dangerous. It didn't reveal truths that could heal. It tore people apart. Zola stepped back, her breath shallow. The mirror was more than a tool. It was a weapon. The village split. On one side were the ones who believed the mirror held power, power that could control their fates, power that could strengthen their spirits. It reveals the truth. That's the gift, one elder shouted. With it we can be free of our lies. On the other side, fear took root. It's a curse, another elder retorted, her voice thick with worry. Look what it's done. To those who've gazed into it. Accusations flew. Some wanted to keep the mirror hidden while others clamored to use it. Zola stood in the middle, torn. Was it truly a gift, as some claimed? Or was it a deadly trap? The arguments grew louder, and the village became a battleground. The weight of the decision pressed on Zola's shoulders. She had to choose. Who would she stand with? The chaos was spreading, infecting every heart in the village. One by one, the villagers who had dared to look into the mirror began to speak of what they saw. I saw my mother's face, one man said, his voice shaking. But it was not my mother. It was a shadow, twisted and wrong. Another woman screamed. I saw my own hands covered in blood. I tried to scream, but the mirror would not let me. Fear spread like fire. The mirror had shown them the worst parts of themselves, parts they could not forget. They were broken, shattered by what they had seen. Zola listened, feeling a chill in her bones. What if the mirror had shown them something real? The people were afraid, afraid of their own darkness. The truth was a dangerous thing. Nia, Zola's childhood friend, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the mirror. But something was different in her gaze. She was no longer the carefree girl Zola had known. Nia's voice was quiet, but insistent. I want to see it. I need to understand it. Zola's heart clenched. Nia had always been by her side, but now Zola wasn't so sure. Was Nia truly seeking answers? Or was there something else behind her curiosity? You can't trust it, Zola warned. The mirror shows only what we fear. But Nia's eyes never left the glass. Fear is the truth, Zola. We have to face it. You know that. Zola watched her friend, suspicion rising in her chest. Nia's quest for truth seemed too eager, too desperate. Was she seeking to uncover something hidden? Something dangerous? Zola paced the small room, her thoughts spinning. Her loyalty to the village had always been clear. She had grown up with the stories, the rituals, the belief that the mirror was part of their sacred traditions. But now, the more she learned, the more she questioned. Was it worth protecting the traditions if they were built on lies? Was it better to expose the truth and risk tearing everything apart? Zola stopped and stared into the mirror. She saw her own reflection, but something else was there too. Her doubt, her fear, her betrayal. It was clear to her now. The mirror didn't just reveal secrets, it created them. Her path was no longer clear. Would exposing the mirror's power destroy the village, or could it save them? Zola was torn. Her decision would change everything. The air shifted the day the outsider arrived. The man was powerful, with an air of authority that made the villagers uneasy. "The mirror is mine," he declared. "I will take it back to my village, where it belongs." His words were sharp, his eyes cold. Zola's heart pounded. This was no simple traveler. He was a leader, and he saw the mirror as a prize to be claimed. His arrival ignited a fierce struggle. The village had always been divided, but now the stakes were higher. The outsider's influence grew with every word. He spoke of power, of control, and the promise of riches. Some villagers swayed toward him, tempted by his promises. Zola watched, realizing that this man would stop at nothing to take the mirror, and with him, the fate of her people. The more the villagers interacted with the mirror, the more its influence spread. Some who had once been strong-willed were now consumed by their reflections, their lives spiraling into madness. One man screamed at his reflection, tearing at his skin, convinced the mirror had trapped his soul. Others became withdrawn, paralyzed by the truths they had seen. Fear became a sickness, spreading from one person to another. The village was unraveling. Zola could feel it in the air. Something was wrong, something deeper than she had imagined. The mirror was no longer just an object, it was a force, and it was threatening to swallow them all. Zola's heart battled within her. On one side, there, was her loyalty to the village, the traditions, the people who had raised her. On the other, there was the truth of the mirror, a truth that had shattered her beliefs. Could she remain silent, uphold the traditions that were falling apart, or would she expose the mirror for the dangerous relic it was? Zola felt herself pulled in every direction, but the more she thought about it, the more the truth seemed clear. The mirror was not a guide. It was a curse. The power it held was too great to ignore. Yet if she exposed it, would she destroy everything? Could she live with the consequences? One night, while searching through the village's ancient records, Zola uncovered the truth. The mirror had not been a gift. It had been a curse, placed by her ancestors as a punishment for a betrayal long buried. The mirror was a trap, designed to expose the darkest parts of the soul, a punishment for sins that had never been forgiven. Her own family had been involved in the betrayal. The mirror was tied to her bloodline, its curse reaching back through the generations. Zola recoiled. The mirror was not a tool of power. It was a reminder of a broken promise, a blood debt. The village's connection to it was not sacred. It was cursed. The village was a battleground, torn between those who saw the mirror as a tool for power and those who feared it. Alliances shifted as new leaders emerged, each with their own agenda. The outsider, now firmly entrenched in the village's politics, began to gather supporters. Zola found herself caught in the middle, torn between the village's future and the truth she had uncovered. The struggle for control of the mirror intensified, and every move seemed to be a betrayal. Zola's heart was heavy with the knowledge that her next choice would determine the fate of her people. Would she reveal the curse of the mirror? Or would she remain silent to protect her village? Either way, the power struggles were only just beginning. Zola stood in front of the mirror, her heart pounding. It was a dangerous artifact, but she had learned its secret. It could be reversed. The power it held could be undone, but the cost was immense. She had been searching for a way out, a way to save her people from the mirror's dark grip. The answer had come in a forgotten text, a whisper of an ancient truce. To undo its curse, to stop the destruction it caused, someone had to offer up their soul. Zola's hands shook as the weight of the choice pressed down on her. A life for a life, a soul for a soul. There was no way around it. The mirror would not release its hold unless someone gave up everything. The sword tore at her. The village was already on the brink, and now she was faced with the most impossible decision of all. The village stood divided. Half of them wanted to destroy the mirror, even if it meant severing the connection to the ancestors. The other half wanted to use it to uncover the buried truths about their past. Zola's decision could not be delayed. "If you destroy it," one elder warned, "you break the bond between us and the spirits. We will lose our guidance forever." Zola's heart ached. The mirror was a symbol of their legacy, the thread connecting them to the spirits who had shaped their lives. But the truth, oh, the truth, was like fire in her veins. The mirror was more than just a relic. It was a key to the buried betrayal that had cursed them. Zola's mind raced. She couldn't have both. To destroy the mirror meant losing everything her family had fought for. To use it meant opening the doors to a truth that could tear the village apart. What could she choose, legacy or truth? The outsider arrived with a fury in his eyes, his hunger for power plain. He had waited for this moment, believing the mirror would bring him the control he craved. "You cannot stop me," he growled, his voice thick with the weight of ambition. "The mirror is mine. I will reshape the future of this village." Zola stepped forward, every inch of her body tense. "You don't know what you're dealing with. The mirror doesn't bring power, it destroys it." But the outsider laughed, his voice sharp. "You speak of curses, but you don't understand. I am the one who will wield it." They clashed, both confronting not only each other, but the truths buried in their pasts. The mirror, ever present, reflected their struggle. Zola saw the past of her people, the lies, the betrayals, and the outsider saw his own twisted history, his desire for control rooted deep. They fought not just for the mirror, but for the power to rewrite their fates. The mirror grew brighter, its light swelling, and then Zola saw it. The truth she had dreaded. The reflection that stared back at her wasn't just her face. It was the face of her ancestor. The one responsible for the betrayal that had bound their people to the curse. The mirror had shown her the path her forebear had walked, the lies they had woven to hold on to power. Zola stumbled back. Her heart broke. Her family, her bloodline, had been the architects of the village's suffering. They had made the choice to use the mirror, to sacrifice everything for control. It was their greed that had cursed the village, that had bound them all to the mirror's power. The weight of the revelation crushed her. She had spent her whole life believing in the strength of her lineage, and now she knew the truth. The betrayal started with her ancestors, and it had never stopped. Zola's mind whirled. The mirror had shown her everything. Her family's sin, the curse, the destruction it had wrought. She had uncovered the past, but what would she do with it? Destroy the mirror and sever her connection to the spirits, or use it to uncover the full truth, knowing that it could tear apart everything her ancestors had built. The pressure was unbearable. The village depended on her. The weight of their history, their hopes, their suffering, all of it pressed down on her. "You must choose," a voice whispered in her mind. But how could she? Destroying the mirror would end the bloodline's hold on the spirits, but would it free the village, or would it doom them to oblivion? Zola was caught, torn between what was right for her people and the legacy she had inherited. She closed her eyes But the images of the past, the betrayals, and the future all collided. The path forward was uncertain, but she had to choose, soon. As the mirror pulsed with dark energy, Zola's hand trembled. The deeper layers of betrayal were unfolding before her eyes. Her ancestors had not just used the mirror, they had manipulated the spirits, taking their power for themselves. They had promised to protect the village, but in truth, they had enslaved it. Zola's breath caught. The mirror was not just a curse, it was a prison built by her forebears to maintain control. Her family had locked the spirits away, kept them bound, and fed off their power. The truth was worse than she could have imagined. The village's entire existence had been founded on lies. The mirror had been their prison and their chains. Zola clenched her fists, the bitterness of it all threatening to drown her. She had to undo this, but at what cost? Zola stood before the mirror, the village behind her, the weight of her ancestors pressing on her chest. To save the village, she had to sever her ties to the spirits. The mirror had to be destroyed, and her connection to her ancestors, her bloodline, would be gone forever. There would be no more guidance, no more protection. She would be alone, cast adrift without the strength of her lineage. But if she didn't act, the village would continue to suffer under the mirror's curse. Zola's heart raced. The sacrifice was immense. It would mean losing everything, her history, her family's legacy, her power. But could she live with watching the village continue to tear itself apart? She clenched her fists and made her choice. The moment had come. Zola could feel the power of the mirror in her hands, its weight heavier than ever. The village was on the brink. If she destroyed it, the village would be freed, but at a great cost. If she kept it, there was no telling what might happen. She could use it to reshape the future, to expose every lie, every truce. But the risks were unimaginable. The mirror could consume everything. She felt the coldness of its power, the temptation to use it to her advantage, to rewrite the past. But no, she would not let the mirror control her. She would choose the village's future. It was time to end the curse, to put an end to the lies, no matter what it cost her. Zola's hands trembled as she activated the mirror. The light flared brighter than ever before, the truth of the village's founding spilling out. The lies were no longer hidden. They were exposed, laid bare for all to see. The ancestors, betrayal, the dark pact they had made, the chains they had forged, it all came to light. The village would never be the same. Zola could feel the power of the mirror flowing through her, urging her to do something, anything. The future of her people was in her hands. She could end it all, destroy the mirror and free the village. Or she could use its power, knowing the risks. The decision was hers. Zola took a deep breath. The mirror's power surged around her and the village stood on the edge of a precipice. She could feel her family's history pulling at her, the weight of generations pressing down. She could save them, or she could condemn them. The mirror's reflection stared back at her, offering both salvation and destruction. Zola's choice would shape the future, not just of her family, but of the entire village. The fate of her people, their legacy, their future. It all depended on this one moment, and Zola knew one thing for sure. Her decision would echo through history. The truth had spilled out, like a river breaking its banks, flooding everything in its path. Some in the village were shaken, their faith in the past shattered. They had once relied on the mirror's power, believing it to be their connection to the ancestors, but now they saw it as the source of their suffering. "We have been deceived," one elder shouted, his voice full of fury. "Our ancestors sold us to darkness. Others, however, found a new strength in the truth. They embraced the revelations, using them to rebuild their faith in themselves, no longer bound by the mirror's curse. But the division was deep, and the anger in some hearts wouldn't be so easily quelled. The village had been fractured, and it would take time, perhaps generations, to heal. Zola stood on the edge of the village, the sun setting behind her, casting long shadows. She had destroyed the mirror, severing the last link to her family's ancestral power. The spirits that had guided her people for centuries were now gone. There would be no more whispers in the wind, no more signs in the stars. The weight of that loss pressed on her chest, suffocating her. She had known the consequences, but knowing and feeling were different things. Her father's lineage was no more. She would never be able to call on the spirits for guidance. Yet somewhere deep inside, she knew it had been the right choice. The mirror had been too dangerous, its power too corrupting. But the ache of losing her heritage was real, and it would follow her for the rest of her life. The village slowly began to rebuild, the work hard and unyielding, but still, something was missing. The people came together, attempting to restore what had been lost, but the scars of betrayal and broken trust lingered. Old tensions bubbled beneath the surface. "How do we rebuild on lies?" someone asked, their voice filled with bitterness. Others worked in silence, their minds heavy with the burden of what they had learned. The mirror may have been destroyed, but its shadow still loomed over the village. Zola watched as the villagers tried to heal, their efforts sincere, but the wounds of the past were not easily mended. They had faced years of deception and manipulation. Would the truth really be enough to heal them? Or had they lost something too deep to reclaim? Zola and her father sat beneath the shade of a tree, the wind gently blowing through the leaves. He looked at her with sadness in his eyes, his once proud stature now bent under the weight of their shared grief. "I thought the mirror would guide us," he said quietly. "I thought it would protect us, keep us strong." Zola didn't speak for a long time. How could she? There was nothing to say. The mirror had been their strength and their undoing. "What are we now?" her father asked, his voice cracked. Zola met his gaze, her heart heavy with the realization that they were no longer the same. "We rebuild," she said simply. "We rebuild without it." The silence stretched between them, both knowing that their journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but also understanding that it was the only way forward. In the aftermath of destruction, Zola stepped forward. The village needed a leader who could navigate the delicate balance between tradition and change. She had destroyed the mirror, severing the ties to her family's spiritual power, but she was still the one who had faced the truth and lived to tell it. People began to look to her, not because of her ancestry, but because of her courage. "We cannot undo the past," she said, addressing the village, "but we can shape the future. We have lost much, but we have not lost each other." The villagers nodded, some still uncertain, but others found hope in her words. Zola was ready to lead them, to rebuild from the ashes. She was no longer just her father's daughter. She was something more, something new. Zola stood in the village center. The people gathered around her. She had fought for the truth, and now she had to live with it. The spirits were gone, and the past could never be reclaimed. But Zola had learned something through this journey. The land, the people, the future. These were hers to guide. She had always believed in the power of her ancestors, but now she understood that true strength came from the land itself, from the bonds they shared, not from the spirits alone. "I will guide you," she said, her voice firm but compassionate, not as one bound to the past, but as one who walks into the future with you. The villagers accepted her words, a new respect for her presence in their lives. She had found her place, not as a healer of the past, but as a leader for the future. The villagers came together, their efforts united in the absence of the mirror's influence. They worked the land with renewed purpose, building homes, planting crops, and restoring their community. They no longer relied on an artifact to connect them to the spirits. They had each other. The elders taught the youth the old ways, not as mere rituals, but as living wisdom, grounded in the land and the heart. "We are our own strength now," one elder said. "The mirror may be gone, but we have the land, and we have each other. That is enough." Zola watched them, her heart swelling with pride. They were beginning to find their way, not through the power of an object, but through their own unity and resilience. As the seasons changed, Zola found a quiet peace within herself. The loss of her ancestral connection was still painful, but she had come to understand that her role was no longer tied to the spirits. Her connection was with the land, with the people she had helped to heal. The future was no longer something to fear. She had embraced the unknown, and with it, she found her place in the village's new world. The journey had not been easy, but it had shaped her, forged her into something stronger than she had been before. The weight of the past no longer held her down. She was free, free to lead, free to create, free to build the future. One evening, Zola and her father sat together watching the sunset. The land had healed, and so had they. "You did well," her father said, his voice softer now, no longer burdened with regret. Zola nodded, but the words felt strange on her tongue. "We did," she corrected. "We did it together." He looked at her, his eyes full of pride. The bond between them had been repaired, stronger than ever. "I may not understand all the ways of the future," he said, "but I understand this. You are the leader the village needs." Zola smiled, finally at peace. They had both learned, both healed, and together they would walk forward into the future. The village, once torn apart by betrayal and secrets, now stood united. The wounds of the past had not disappeared, but the healing had begun. Zola and her father, once divided by their roles and their grief, now worked side by side, guiding the people into a new era. They had faced the truce, no matter how painful, and now they moved forward, guided by the wisdom of the land, the strength of their unity, and the lessons of their ancestors. Lessons not of power, but of survival, of resilience, and of community. The future was theirs to shape, and they would do so with care, knowing that the past had its place, but it was not the path they would follow. Zola stared into the polished mirror, its surface gleaming under the sun. Once fractured and dark, it now reflected the world with a clarity that made her breath catch. It was the same mirror that had held so many secrets, but now it seemed different, calm, still, unyielding. The years of turmoil, of painful revelations, had led her to this moment. She saw herself in the mirror, not just her face, but everything she had become. This was the end of one journey and the beginning of another, not only for her, but for the entire village. She had walked through fire, and now it was time to embrace what she had learned. Zola's reflection seemed to shift before her eyes, as though the mirror itself was speaking. The power of the mirror had never truly been in its ability to show the past. No, the true power lay in its ability to make people confront the truths they had long buried. It forced them to face themselves, to acknowledge the lies, the hurt, the unspoken betrayals. Zola understood now. The mirror was not just a link to the ancestors. It was a test of honesty, of courage, of acceptance. And in facing it, her people had been forced to grow. They had been given the chance to change, but how many had truly accepted it? As she looked deeper into the mirror, Zola saw more than just her image. She saw the path she had walked to get here, the pain of discovering truths she was never meant to know, the strength it had taken to face the damage the mirror had caused, and the resilience required to rebuild. She remembered the fear, the anger, the isolation. But she also remembered the moments of clarity, of understanding, of finally seeing herself not through the eyes of the village, but through her own. The journey had been long and hard, but it had brought her here. It had brought her to this moment where she could look at the mirror and not be afraid of what it showed her. The village, now standing behind her, watched the mirror with a mixture of awe and fear. They had all seen it reveal the past, and the revelations had not been kind. Betrayals, hidden desires, forgotten debts, truths no one had dared to speak. Some villagers could not bear it. They had expected the mirror to be a guide, not a weapon that stripped them of their lies. "We cannot move forward with this weight," one of them muttered, shaking their head. But Zola knew this was the cost of truth. The past was heavy, but carrying it was the only way to free themselves. She could see the struggle in their eyes. Some wanted to bury it, to go back to the way things were. But Zola also saw something else, a flicker of hope, a possibility of real change. Zola turned to face her people, standing tall and unwavering. "The truth has come, whether we wanted it or not," she began, her voice firm. "We cannot turn back from it. The past is heavy, yes, but it is not our future. We have the power to rebuild, to rise above it, but we must choose to walk forward together without letting what was tear us apart." She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. "Do not allow your anger, your fear to cloud the path ahead. The future is ours, but only if we choose unity over division, healing over revenge." Zola's gaze swept over the villagers, her heart heavy with the weight of what was yet to come. "We cannot forget the traditions of our people," she said, "but we must also recognize that the world changes. We must adapt, grow, and find new ways to honor our past without being trapped by it. The old ways are strong, but they must also make room for what we are becoming. The world is not the same, and neither are we." She could see some faces nodding, understanding what she meant. Tradition was important, yes, but it was not meant to hold them back. They had to embrace change while keeping the essence of who they were intact. Zola's voice grew softer, yet more powerful. "We stand at the edge of a new dawn," she said. "A dawn where we no longer hide behind secrets, behind lies. The truth is out, it cannot be undone. But we can choose to unite, to move forward together. Or we can allow the past to tear us apart. The choice is ours." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Some villagers looked down, shame in their eyes, while others raised their heads, determination setting in their hearts. Zola knew that the path to unity wouldn't be easy, but it was the only path that mattered. It was the only path that could lead them forward. The days that followed were not easy. The village had begun to heal, but the scars of the past were still fresh. Some old divisions remained, but slowly the villagers began to come together. They worked side by side, rebuilding not only their homes but their relationships. They shared their burdens, acknowledged their wrongs, and slowly they began to move forward. The village, once fractured by secrets and betrayal, now stood united in the knowledge that the future was theirs to shape. Zola had led them through the darkness of their own truths, and now they were ready to face the light. Zola walked through the village, her eyes taking in the people who were slowly recovering. The pain of the past would never be forgotten, but she knew now that she had the strength to help heal the wounds. The mirror had shown her many things, but it had also shown her the power of her own spirit. She was no longer just a healer of the body, but a healer of the soul. She had learned the hard way that healing was not just about fixing what was broken. It was about understanding, accepting, and moving forward with grace. She had found her place in the village, and it was not just as a leader, but as someone who could help guide them through whatever storms lay ahead. The mirror stood at the center of the village, its surface smooth and clear. It was no longer a tool for revealing the past, but a symbol of the village's transformation. It had shown them their darkest truths, but now it reflected their unity. It no longer cast shadows of the past, but light on the future. Zola looked at it one last time. She knew it was not the mirror that had brought them here. It was the choices they had made, the strength they had found within themselves. The mirror was only a symbol, but it was a powerful one. It reminded them that change was possible, that growth was inevitable, and that the future could be shaped by their actions.